Let's talk about another form of function. We know that in Dart, everything can be treated as object, and function can also be treated as object. Let me explain that. Let me remove the quotes. So, like we have integer, boolean, and string types, we also have a type called function and if. For example, if is a reference of a type function, and you see that a function is actually an abstract class. So if I want to assign something into this variable, then I must have to assign a function because it's a type of function. And now if I want to assign something, and I told you that I need to assign a function, so what you can do is you can define a function just here. So you don't have to define a function with a name and then pass the parameter. You can also do that. For example, if I define another function like something, and maybe this function prints something, and now I want to assign this function to this function reference. All I need to do is just call this or pass this something, that method reference. So I am not actually calling this function over here. I'm just passing the name or reference of this function, and now the reference of this function is contained in f variable. And now if you want to print this something text on the console, what you can do is just call this function reference just like that, or simply you have a method called call. You can simply call this call function, or simply you can actually put the parenthesis just after the reference name. And if I run this application, you will see that we'll be able to see the output of this method. But there is no point of calling or printing something in this way, because we already have a function with a name. Instead of calling this function name directly, what we're doing is we are putting this function into another reference and then calling that reference object. So this is not the actual use of this function reference. In this case, we can directly call this something method, right? Okay, let me remove this something, and let me just talk about the thing that I was previously doing, and that is, in a function reference type, we need to assign a function, and we can do that by directly declare a function just on the spot. And this is actually called an anonymous function, or sometimes it is called the lambda expression. The difference between anonymous function and normal function is it doesn't have a name. So this function, this is actually the parameter list, and this is the body, and this function only lacks the name. So now if I print or do something inside this function block, for example, print, and I say I am anonymous, and now if I want to print this on the console, all I have to do is just call the reference like this. So now we have our output in the console like I am anonymous. So the idea is we can actually define a function without a name and put it inside a reference. And it is not always necessary to define a function or anonymous function and to assign it to a function type reference. It is not always necessary. The use of function reference, what we normally use with other types of variables. For example, if we declare a method, something like that, void add, and it takes two parameters of integer type, int x, then int y, and just like other types of variable, we can actually pass another function to a parameter of another function. Okay, for example, if this add method takes the third argument of type function, we can simply define the type like this one. Okay, so now if I call this add function over here. So the first parameter is an integer, the second parameter is another integer, and the third parameter I need to provide a function. And it doesn't specifically specify what kind of function. That means what kind of parameter it takes or what is the return type. It only says it will accept a function. That means any type of function. And instead of providing a function name, we can actually define the function just over here. Okay, so this is the actual use of lambda expression or anonymous function. Instead of defining a function with a name, I'm just defining a function in the scope of this parameter. So this function will only be accessed via this function reference. That means where I am actually passing this function reference. So this function, there is no way to call this function outside the scope or maybe from different file. The only way to call this function is inside this add function, because we are passing this reference or function to this reference. So now if we are just defining the function over here, and now if I want to print something over here, like print maybe another something, and this will be only printed whenever this is called, or if we do something like this. Okay, so now if I call this add method, then you will see the output as this one, print something. Let me wait. So it says something. Okay, so the function type is used just like other data types, that we can pass through another function as a parameter, or even a function can return a function type if necessary. For example, if this function returns another function, then we have to return something like maybe return just declare a function body, because it says that from here we have to okay, func, maybe I'm just okay, so now this function returns a function and I'm returning a function. Okay, so a function can accept another function as a parameter, and function also can return another function. And in Dirt 3, from a function we can return multiple values like a record. So there are some situations where we might need this type of configuration, but you just have to remember that there is something called anonymous function. Without a name, we can define a function, and there is something called the function type. So inside a function type, we assign a function, and as a parameter of another function, we can take or we can declare a function type that can take a function as a parameter, and also we can return function from another function. Okay, so now let's focus on some real example, and to show that I need to define a list for that. So let me define a list, for example, final numbers. Okay, I have defined 5 numbers or added 5 numbers inside this numbers list. So this is actually a list of integer. Okay, so now we know that a list type have many utility methods. If you just place a full stop after the reference name, and you will see a lot of utility methods called first or indexed or empty, etc., etc. So we also have another method called for each. And if you look carefully, that this for each function actually takes another function of this type. It says it takes a function, and this time the function will be something like it will take a parameter as an integer or integer parameter, and it will return void, and this is just the name of the reference. So now we need to pass a function inside this for each method parameter, and you see that for each actually takes this type of function. So we can do that by passing an anonymous function. So this is the function, and this is the value of integer type, and now this is the body. And if I now inside the body just print the value, and you will see that we'll be able to see all the items of this numbers list. You see, we didn't run any for loop over here, but the output looks like we actually ran a for loop. So for each method is basically taking the responsibility of running a loop by itself. And as a parameter of for each, we just passed a lambda expression or function definition. And inside the for each function actually runs the loop on this list, and it gives us back each item through this function. So this function is only called by the for each function, and we can actually never call this function outside of this scope, as if it doesn't exist. So this is some useful cases of passing a lambda expression just to limit the access of the function, or just to limit the access within a function scope. And we don't have to declare a function with a name, and in such situation we can simply pass a lambda expression. And you will see many examples in Flutter. I think the moment we work with the button, the event listener as a button on click listener, we can provide a function reference, or we can provide a lambda expression to easily declare the function body. So this is actually the anonymous function or the lambda expression. And in many other languages it has a concept, like in Kotlin or in even in Java. So the syntax is slightly different for other languages, but in Dart we just have to provide a parameter list, and we just have to provide a body, and if there is a return type, you have to declare the return type just before, if it has parameters. So the parameter you just define, you don't have to define the parameter type over here, because for each function requires a parameter of type int. So this value is automatically int, because for each function runs the loop inside this list and gives back each item inside this parameter, and we are just printing the values.